hearings this week, confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh and to join the Supreme Court. This is the 5-4 swing vote seat, I guess. And Anthony Kennedy was a swing vote, I guess, in, parentheses, maybe with an asterisk on some things. Certainly when it came to a woman's right to choose, he was an important mitigating factor in the right's attempt to relieve women of that right. And in a couple of other areas, he may prove to have been stopping the right-wing assault on a series of other rights, not to mention other important doctrines, the Chevron doctrine. I want to get your sense, just broadly speaking, where is folks like yourself who have an intimate understanding of the law and of the Supreme Court? Where are you folks in terms of seeing this process, this nomination process, as legitimate? I mean, I can't help but think, I've had this problem with the Supreme Court, frankly, since Bush v. Gore, but we're now entering, even a darker period, it seems to me, where the process, never mind the way they adjudicate, the process seems to have lost all legitimacy in some respects because of Merrick Garland.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think you can certainly carbon date it to Bush v. Gore. You can carbon date it, and I think Republicans do carbon date it to the borking of Robert Bork. It depends on where you want to set your sort of start clock, but I think that there has been a general consensus that the process is bad. It's getting worse. The death of the filibuster, then the death of the filibuster last year for Neil Gorsuch. So it depends on what metric you're using, but I don't think you're wrong to say that everybody has completely lost confidence, not just in the idea of the court as a sort of impartial, apolitical arbiter of balls and strikes, but also how we even choose justices in the first instance. And I do agree also, I think, with the premise that if you can't get over Merrick Garland, and I can't because I don't think there was a principled reason to block him, then everything that comes after feels tainted. And we certainly saw that last year with Neil Gorsuch, where, Democrats on the committee were just like, this is crazy. Why are we even here? And I don't think that's been alleviated. I think if you look at how the Kavanaugh hearings are playing out, just the amount of public disgust, the amount of protest we're hearing in the chamber, the amount of resistance and coordinated resistance by Democrats in the Senate, I think absent what happened to Merrick Garland, nothing of the sort would be going on. So I think you're quite right that even if you bracket questions about Trump's legitimacy and whether he should be in a position to be picking a justice right now, those are a separate set of issues. I think you're completely right that it just feels like the process is so broken that everybody's lost confidence.
And I'm compelled to say that Merrick Garland was not blocked. Merrick, the issue, the Republicans certainly could have voted against Merrick Garland, right? They had the votes if they wanted the votes. The issue is they never even gave him a hearing. And, that to me seems, they can compare it to what happened to Robert Bork. They can say, we don't like the way you voted in the hearing. We don't like the reason why you rejected Robert Bork. But there was not even a rejection of Merrick Garland here. There was a denial of the president's ability to even nominate, right? Because if you don't do a hearing, there is no nomination. If there's no opportunity to vote against the nominee, there is no nominee.
I think that's right, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, Sam. I think that this was about power and not the Constitution. This was a determination by Chuck Grassley and by Mitch McConnell that he was simply not going to get a hearing or a vote. In many cases, he didn't even get courtesy meetings, and that was based on this pretextual argument that there's some kind of Biden rule that wasn't the Biden rule that said that you don't even get to appoint someone in your last year of your presidency, notwithstanding the fact that something like a third of presidents have appointed someone in their last year of their presidency. So the whole thing was a pretext. And you're quite right. They did it because they could. But here's the part that's really tricky. I think that Democrats that could have punished them at the ballot box for that behavior, and that was the expectation, that Democrats would be incensed that this seat had been held open for a year, that John McCain and Ted Cruz were openly running in the fall of 2016 on the principle that if Hillary Clinton were to win the presidency, they would hold that seat open for 4 or 8 more years. And Democrats failed to do the thing they needed to do to check that. And so I think in a weird way, this turns into a massive gamble that paid off, because Donald Trump said when he ran for office, he said, you're going to hold your nose and vote for me if for no other reason than I have a vacancy on the Supreme Court and you need me. And by about a 2-to-1 margin, voters showed up for him over Hillary Clinton. And so I think, you're right to be affronted, but I also think that Democrats were completely complicit in letting it happen, and completely complicit, by the way, in failing to run for office in the Senate, particularly on the principle that this seat had been held open and that was an affront. So I think it's just really complicated. They did it because they could, but I think in a sense Democrats let them.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. There was a political malpractice that extended from Barack Obama, as far as I'm concerned, through the Senate Democrats in their inability to make this an issue. And frankly, I would say there's a certain amount of malpractice on anyone on the left, from the entire left, that doesn't seem to appreciate the relevance of the Supreme Court. And we've certainly talked about that. So, okay, before we get into any of the specifics in terms of what Kavanaugh is dealing with and what the implications are going to be if he does make it to the court, with just a minute left before we got to take a break, do you think the Democrats should have walked out? Should they have, even based upon what we've just agreed upon, that there was a certain amount of political malpractice by the Democrats in not being able to hold to account? It's not even that they failed. It doesn't even feel like there was an attempt to hold anybody to account because of these, their failure to hold hearings for Merrick Garland. Do you think they should have just en masse gotten up on day one and said, you know what, this is illegit, we're walking out? Or they should have done it because they didn't get the documents that were were delivered for Elena Kagan, or that to the extent that they got any documents, they got them 12 hours before. In fact, I'll tell you what, Dahlia, let's take a break and I'll have you answer those long line of questions when we return. I'm Sam Seder. I'm talking to Dahlia Lithwick. We'll be right back on Ring of Fire Radio.